All right, everybody. Here we are for episode 79 of Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. This episode's going to be, I don't want to say sad because I want to consider it a celebration of these people we're about to talk about. But with the recent celebrity deaths, we figured we kind of do an expanded episode on Gone But Not Forgotten on some of the celebrities that we wanted to talk about that we didn't because we don't do that segment anymore. We just talk about them, the people that passed away at the end and stuff. But this last week, the last couple weeks, really, if you're a Hollywood fan or celebrity fan, have been a bit rough with Betty White and John Madden, Sidney Poitier, Peter Bogdanovich. Unfortunately, the most recent one added to that list is Bob Saget, America's dad. Everyone said Betty White was America's grandma. Bob Saget was America's dad because he was Danny Tanner for about 9 years on Full House, and then came back and did it again on Fuller House. Went to do America's Funniest Home Videos. So he was, when we were younger, Wayne, he was in our living room a lot for like a good 10 years.
That's how I knew Bob Saget, was from America's Funniest Home Videos. I never watched Full House. It's like, I don't want to watch a show about girls because, being a stupid kid at the time, couldn't recognize the brilliance of that show.
Yeah.
So, just his corny, just dad jokes were evident. And then, of course, knowing his comedy, his stand-up routines, that was such a shock. I mean, probably to everybody that actually, took the time to follow him and watch his stuff. It's like, oh, okay, this is not Danny Tanner.
Well, and I think it's funny because we look at it differently because we saw him as America's dad first, or the host of America's Funniest Home Videos, very PG stuff. And then when he left that, we realized it almost seemed like he was edgy to forget the past. But in reality, he had been that kind of comic his entire life. He just got the Full House gig and then became America's dad from that point. He, if you listen to him, he did a Mark Maron podcast, which Mark was kind enough to repost all 3 interviews with Bob, where he talks about he grew up and his dad told a joke of looking at a menu, they got cake and cock and they're all out of cake today, like that. He goes that's what I grew up with. That was his dad when he was 8 years old. So he grew up with just the foul mouth comedy, and he brought that into his act. And he I don't say he hid it, but he didn't show us it until we got older, when he directed Dirty Work, and also had that cameo in Half Baked, where he got to say to Dave Chappelle, "I suck dick for coke. Do you ever suck dick for weed?" Of course, Chappelle says no. Comparing addictions, basically. So that is, I think, what what he became known for after that. And then he was part of the Aristocrats movie, telling the dirtiest joke known to mankind. But he was really funny. He's a very funny person. I saw some of his comedy specials as he got older. I think his most recent one, which was 2017, I watched. He was a really funny guy. But what's more important here, Wayne, is that it seems to be that he was literally how we all saw him as America's dad. Even though he told the dirty, filthy jokes, he was one of the nicest people in Hollywood, apparently, according
Absolutely.
to
So many comics that were coming up said that they were mentored in one way, shape, or another by Bob Saget, and just the time he took the time to talk with them and coach them and just be a genuinely good person. And obviously you've got all the people from Full House posting their tributes, and
Stamos and him. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Jodie Sweeney had a really nice thing. Candace Bure. Wait, is that
Candace Cameron Bure? Yeah. I don't know if she's the Bure anymore because I think she divorced that hockey player.
Gotcha. Well, they've all posted really nice, touching tributes to him, and that's just nice to see that there was no animosity or, wow, this guy's really a dick to work with. It's just a genuinely great human being.
Yeah. He was great with charities. You know, I find that out after he passed away. His sister passed away from a horrible disease back in the 90s. And he started a foundation and he helped chair that foundation and support money. He made a comment on the Marin podcast that it felt wrong to have the money that he had and not share it with charities and be helpful to people. So when you hear, and then then I'm sure he probably followed that sentiment up with a dick joke or a pedophile joke, which, like, that's what's weird is like he would say these nice things and then he would have to be like, well, I got to be edgy. So then he would go and he would be edgy. And it was funny. I really recommend those interviews with him and Mark Maron. They're really good. They give you kind of a full inside look of who Bob Saget was, his family. Even though him and his wife divorced, I think like in the late 90s, they co-parented and they've remained friendly to each other. And he had three older daughters. So it's when something like this happens, it's real sad. It's especially real sad too because when Norm Macdonald passed away, he was one of the ones. He was really close to Norm, and so I listened to him, kind of get very emotional about Norm passing away, and then less than a year later to have Bob Saget pass away was was pretty crazy, just when you look at it that way. And it's one of those ones that definitely came as a surprise. I know he was 65, but 65 is the new 45 these days, and people are living a lot longer. So you kind of expected him to be around, I think, for a lot more time.
That's a really good point. The other thing, sorry not to cut you off there. It's like well, he was 65, so that's still far too young. And then people are like, well, I wonder what he died of. It's like, why do you automatically assume that it was an addiction or something like that, or a sickness they weren't telling us about? One, it's not our business. Two, like, why do you jump to conclusions? Just irritating stuff.
I think they released the fact that it wasn't drug related right away so that people would stop asking those questions, which I think was at least nice on the police part of it, to go like, it doesn't, drugs do not appear to have played a part in this. And if it did, it didn't matter. But it's still, you're right. It's that question that we always ask. And because he was a comedian, granted, he was a white man. A lot of times they ask these questions of the minority people that have passed away, of celebrities. But he was a comedian, and comedians are known to drug and do all that kind of stuff. So
right. One of the things, thinking about it, how Bob Saget would have responded was, "Gee, I wonder if I died from the dick or the cocaine."
Exactly. Well, and it was, there was a joke on the Marin podcast where he actually joked about like how he was dying and he was going to die right after the episode they were filming, and so it was kind of like bittersweet type of thing because you hear it. Hearing it was from over 10 years ago, the interview, but it just, when you lose someone who's just a good person, it sucks. It sucks more. He hadn't really, he kind of made his money and then just kind of did what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. He wrote a couple books, I think.
Yep.
And just, was a dad and a friend and was on Curb Your Enthusiasm, I believe. He had a bit part on Entourage for a while, as himself. As Bob
I was going to say, didn't he play himself?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He went to like the Playboy Mansion, and he was like he basically played the dirty version of himself that everyone thought he was, like, outside of being Full House. Where, like I said, I think a lot of that's just his comedy. He's not really a dirty, pervy person like at home. That's just how he is on stage. Or was on stage. It's weird to say still. But so we just wanted to throw some respect towards Bob Saget. He definitely will be missed. Very funny. If you haven't seen his comedy specials, seek them out. Even his older ones, because his older ones were raunchy too. He just looked a lot more like Danny Tanner back then. So,
thinking about just 2022 and the 2.5 weeks that we've been living in it, this has been rough, man. I think this, was it 2016, 2017 was the other really hard year, at least to start, with celebrities passing. When we lost Alan Rickman and we lost David Bowie and Prince. It's like this one. Like, let's talk about Betty White. I know we gave her a really nice, touching tribute to her a couple weeks ago, but when you live 99 years and the collective world agrees that it wasn't long enough, I mean, that just says something too, like, gosh, like, I don't know. I just enough 2022. You
You know,
win
I
already.
think it's with these two people too, especially. We kind of lived through them, right? Like we wanted to see the world through their eyes because they were so pure at times, and they were so funny, and
Yep.
they were just kind of our outlet, I think. And I think with what's great about Bob Saget too. I mean, I really implore people to go out and seek out some of his interviews where he talks, because he was telling some stories about like the civil rights, because he grew up in he was a kid back in the '60s, and he made a comment. Uh, Mark Maron, he made a comment how his parents were sometimes insensitive back then to some of these. Not that they were necessarily racist, but like they didn't know any better. And Maron's like, oh yeah, different times. That's what we say. We say, oh, it was a different time. Well, Bob Saget's immediate retort was that, oh, well, these were times that never should have happened. And that was like, when you hear someone say something like that, you're like, oh, well, he gets it. Like, he understands people. He understands that everybody should be the same, that we all, or not the same, but you know what I mean, that we should all be treated the same.
Yeah.
And for someone to kind of just say that without making a big deal out of it too, it was just like, that's just him and that's who he is. I thought that was really cool to kind of hear stuff like that. And because a lot of times you never know how people really feel, and I think it's interesting to hear them kind of open up a little bit. And that's what's good about Maron is, if you're not familiar with Mark Maron, yes, people go on there, promote books, TV shows, and movies, but it's like kind of you and I, Wayne, here. It's a conversation. And that's
Yep.
so he ends up getting certain things out of them that they maybe normally, if they went to Fox Morning, they wouldn't give that out to those people, So it's interesting the stuff that he's able to kind of get out of them. And I think if you go and you watch those interviews, I hope that you'll feel the same way I feel about the guy. And it's almost realizing after the fact that it really, really sucks even more that he's gone, because it's a real good person that we lost, and a man who liked to help other people, other fellow comedians, fellow actors. And yeah, just big. And onto the Betty White too, with her helping out too. There was a clip of her from her old TV show where she showcased a African American musician or dancer, I can't remember which, on her show, and the network didn't want him on there, and because they didn't want to mix. It was the 1950s or 1960s, and
I
she
think it
was
was
like,
1956, if I remember the article
yeah, I'm
correctly.
sure you saw the clip. Yeah, so that was a big deal back then. So the fact, again, someone.
And how did she respond to that? She gave him more airtime.
Exactly.
Trying to tell him
So
to stick
like, Betty White was that type of. That's what I'm saying. She's a hard ass bitch, man. She was one of those people that, like, you told her she couldn't do something, she was like, "Fuck you, I'm gonna do it." And she did that back in the 1950s when women didn't even have as many rights as they have now. So I mean, she was just had it, man. She was just one of those. I would go back to being the Ricardos, just like Lucille Ball. Like, she was, you didn't want to mess with her, and I think that's what endured someone like Betty White and Bob Saget and Lucille Ball to us, is that they didn't take no shit, and but they were also very grateful and respectful to people, and wanted to help everybody. I know I'm just kind of rambling here, but this is just kind of
ramble away. That's what the show is today.
Yes.
Let me
So
ask you this: what has been the most shocking passing of a celebrity? Which one affected you the most?
I'm gonna go with, so there's two. Well, we already talked about one, and that was Chris Farley. That one was rough.
Yep.
I still think about him from time to time. But I think the earliest one for me that comes to memory, and we're going to talk about a couple other people, was River Phoenix. Because River Phoenix was at the time when I started to really love film and kind of get into movies. And so I grew up, I watched his movies. I watched Sleepers with him and Sidney Poitier. I watched some of his earlier work. Obviously, saw him in Indiana Jones. And I think I had just seen Sleepers like right before he passed away. So I've become a really big fan just off of that movie. And when I found out he died, I've never cried when a celebrity died, and I didn't back then either. But it hit me in a way where I was like, damn. Like, I knew back then how talented he was, and how like much it sucked that we weren't going to get another River Phoenix performance.
Right.
So that was one that hit me real hard. What was yours, Wayne? What was one that really hit you?
Well, we've talked about my love of Robin Williams, but that one was probably. It's too easy for me to select that one. I'm just gonna list off a couple real quick. Obviously, Paul Walker, because I love the Fast and Furious
Yeah.
movies, and I loved so many of the movies he was in. Varsity Blues, obviously. Just Paul Walker was a tragic one for me. Obviously, we've talked about him before. This one before, Heath Ledger,
Yes.
or Keith Fletcher.
Keith Fletcher. Okay, so let me tell that story because I don't think I've ever told that story on here. We've mentioned it a few times. Um, so in 2008, I was working at Feld in Aurora, and me and Rebecca, we'd been dating for about a year. And obviously we met at Blockbuster. If people know this, and I'm a big movie person, and she knew that, and she knew I was waiting for Dark Knight to come out. And so the way I found out about Heath Ledger passing away was I get a phone call from my wife. I'm at work. I'm like being kind of quiet. I'm like, what's up? And she's like, Keith Fletcher passed away. I was like, who? I'm like, why do I care? Who's Keith Fletcher? And she's like, well, that guy that's in that thing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, the guy that's going to be in the Batman movie. I'm like, wait, do you mean Heath Ledger? And she's like, yeah, that guy. I'm like, what? So then that took me down the rabbit hole of searching everything, trying to find out what happened. And of course, we all know it was a drug overdose. That was going to be one I was going to say. Like, that one hit me almost as much as the River Phoenix one because Brokeback Mountain came out a couple years prior, and he killed that movie. He was amazing in it. He really showed his range and what he can do. So I knew at that point that he was River Phoenix level talented, and I was like, okay, this guy's fucking going places. And we all knew he was going to be the Joker. Those of us that were fans of his were excited for him as the Joker. A lot of Batman fans were kind of pissed off because they're, the 10 things I hate about you guy. He was the gay cowboy, blah, 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 all the derogatory things people would say about him. We all knew that he was going to be amazing in it. And so it made watching Dark Knight that much more heartbreaking, realizing that this was one of the last performances we were going to get on him. There was another movie released a little bit after that from Terry Gilliam. It's the Dr. Parnassus or whatever the hell, the one they ended up subbing in Johnny Depp, Jude Law, and Colin Farrell into all filling out that role.
Yes.
But The Dark Knight was the last big movie that he did, and he won the Oscar for it posthumously. What Wayne said. And he he deserved it. He was incredible in that movie. It's still a movie that I watch for him because he's so talented. And he's not even in it like that much. Like, he's only in the movie for 30 minutes of a 2.5 hour movie, but his presence is felt throughout that entire film.
Yep.
And it still feels like his movie.
What was a quote by Maggie Gyllenhaal? She was visibly and physically disturbed by him on set.
Yes.
Just looking at him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And she knew him. She knew him because of Jake. So they were all all the three of them were friends. But it was still working with him was very upsetting in that character because he was very into it, as we all know. The rumors of that's what led to his needing pills and stuff. And I think it was more the fact he was probably spreading himself very thin. Who knows the mind of a person and what makes them seek medical attention. We could question it all day, but Ledger was he was one of those guys. He was going to take it to another level.
Yep.
And we sadly did not get to see that happen. So
right.
So anyway, you were in the middle of telling about yours.
No, it's fine. That's because I've referenced it a few times, and people are like, "What the fuck is he talking about?" Because we never explained it. So, the last guy I really want to talk about is honestly, it's actually a musician, Kurt Cobain, the lead frontman for Nirvana. His passing in '94. I was about to turn 12 years old, just really getting into the cusp of my tastes in music and whatnot, not being so influenced by my parents anymore as much as I used to be in my younger years. And just Nirvana was just a different sound, and it just really spoke to an entire generation. A lot of people have said that Kurt Cobain was the voice of the 90s generation of kids growing up, and the first batch of millennials, if you will. And just his death just rocked the entire world. If you, I don't know if you recall a lot of this, but
Yeah.
um, it's just really tragic. And whether or not he actually killed himself or not, we know that he had demons and that he was really unhappy and sad with his life and was not prepared for the fame that he got. So, and there's conflicting stories about whether he was able to do it or whether he was murdered and this, that, and the other thing. Regardless of how, just the tragic end moments of his life and just how sad and alone he felt. It just hearing all these things and reading the final letters that he wrote and just talking about how he'd rather burn out than fade away, and how I just, it's just tragic, and it affected me in a sense that you know hearing the music differently now, and just what is, you hear the lyrics, but what is he actually trying to say? And to be so rich and so popular but feel so alone, it affects me to this day still, just to think about it. So
Yeah.
anytime I hear a Nirvana track, which they still play pretty
Oh,
regularly, even though now it's
yeah.
on classic rock, which is a
I know,
little weird
right?
for me, but yeah, he
Getting old, man.
yeah, he talks about the artists that came before him that inspired him, but how many countless artists now were inspired by Nirvana and his lyrics and whatnot. And granted, he wasn't the best guitarist by any means, but and a lot of times his lyrics didn't make a lot of sense, but it's the feeling, I think, in the songs that
Yeah.
what it was really trying to encapsulate. So
Well, you have to tell. I'm a huge fan, so like, I
yep,
mean, that was another one because that was right around that and the River Phoenix one were right around that same time, within a year or two of each other.
yep,
And they were both kind of representation of grunge style, fashion style, because Kurt Cobain with the music and stuff, and River Phoenix, that's kind of how he dressed. So, and he was also in a band, but not a famous one.
the anti-establishment
Yeah,
movement, if you will, so, or continuing the movement.
yeah,
So
for sure. Um, it Kurt Cobain, it was one that definitely I think hit hard because that's when I started getting into music. Smashing Pumpkins came out around that time. I was getting into
yep,
them, getting into Nirvana, and then like he was gone, and it was just like, whoa, what happened? And he was really big at very quickly. He rose the ladder of fame,
yeah,
and again, like you said, we don't really know exactly what happened. Maybe that was too much for him, which I think
yep,
in a lot of cases with some celebrities that's what's happened. Um, with there, I do want to recommend one movie to watch. I think that's about fandom and it's about Nirvana. Is Highway, and it's a little known film with Jared Leto and Jake Gyllenhaal from like 2000 or 2001,
mm-hmm.
and it's about two fans and one of their girlfriends, I think, or there's a third girl in there for some reason, who go on a road trip to Seattle to where Nirvana was born essentially, and to basically pay tribute to Kurt because of his suicide. It takes place on that in that time. So 90, was it 92, 93 when he killed himself, or when he
94,
died rather. Um,
April
so
5th,
that's where the movie
1994.
takes place, like right after. I do recommend that. I don't know if it's easy to find or not, but it's definitely, I think, an interesting look at how a celebrity death can affect fans in a way that's not creepy. It's not like they didn't have like a shrine to him or anything. It's just he was an artist that made them feel things, and when he died, they became emotional about it. And I think that's a normal reaction that we have as humans. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's maybe if you spend like 3 months mourning that person, then maybe you should go seek help. But if someone famous that you were a fan of passes away, and you feel emotionally connected to a certain extent, I think it's okay. And I think we all kind of go through that no matter what it is. If you like to read a lot of books and an author you love passes away, or if you watch movies or TV shows or listen to music, they're all there. So one thing I'll say with River Phoenix, I do recommend My Own Private Idaho. It's directed by Gus Van Sant, stars him and Keanu Reeves as like street prostitutes. It's really, really good. It's a really great film, and him and Keanu Reeves are really fantastic in it. I know Keanu was real good friends with him too. I know Keanu,
Mm-hmm.
another nicest person in Hollywood. Um, but yeah, that's
Going back to Nirvana really quick too. I'm sorry
sure.
not to change back. There's an interest. Michael Pitt did a movie by Gus Van Sant
Yep.
called The Last Days in 2005,
Yes.
which also was inspired by Kurt's Last Days. Also a
Yes.
very very interesting watch. So
It is an
um,
interesting watch. It is not supported by anybody involved, so all the names are changed.
right.
But it does basically follow the story of a artist who is kind of at his last rope and goes to the cabin, and yeah, and we all know what happened. So there are some documentaries too. Now those are
Mhm.
maybe a little more biased in their opinion. So there's the one I think it's called Kurt and Courtney that
Yes.
was very much in the opinion that Courtney Love had something to do with his death, including her father. Like did an interview where I can't even imagine doing an interview where I blame my kid for somebody else's murder. So
Yeah. And obviously they go into some very very interesting directions with some very very interesting issues where people claim, and obviously I use the word, I want to focus on this, they claim that Courtney actually offered them money, thousands of dollars, to kill Kurt in the manner which he died.
yes,
And
yes,
obviously, you know, people are paid to be in documentaries, and the validity of it is yet to be known, but
yes.
just it makes one wonder. There's an ongoing former police sergeant, I believe, or detective, who is now an investigative PI who is still running a case on trying to figure this out. And I don't know, it's very
Yeah.
interesting. So, yeah, popular for the wrong reasons, unfortunately.
Right, exactly. All right. So the next person I wanted to talk about, I think this one was probably one of the most surprising ones, or even shocking, because it was definitely not expected. Um, when you hear someone killed themselves while it was not expected, you're given a reason. Anton Yelchin. Anton Yelchin is a young actor. He's from Star Trek, plenty of other movies. Charlie Bartlett, um, Green Room, one of my favorite like survival horror films that's come out in the last 10 years or so. But the reason I bring up, like, say, it was shocking and surprising, is he was at his house. He got out of his car. This is from what we know. Uh, Went to go like open his gate or something to go back into his house or something along those lines. Didn't realize that the car wasn't fully in park. Car rolls down, or something happened. I think it was a malfunction with the car. The car rolls down the hill and pins him against his fence, and he bleeds out and dies. So that was a shocking one. That was like, holy shit! Like, wait, what? He was 27 years old. It was very sad. Um, he's still a lot of life left to live for him. He was just kind of coming into his own acting wise. Just finished the last Star Trek movie, so he was gonna, be done with that franchise for a while. And it just, that one hit, and that one hit hard because, at that point I already had a kid. So yeah, I think you're just thinking of someone dying young, and it really
Hmm.
just kind of messes you up a little bit.
Yeah, apparently it was a faulty piece of equipment on his vehicle that malfunctioned when it was parked on an incline. And
That's just, yeah.
just thinking about that, and just he didn't die right away. You know what I mean? Just the panic and the
That was what messed with me when that happened. That one messed with me a lot, just thinking about what he had to be thinking about. And it really effed me up, honestly, at that time. It wasn't like an emotional connection to him. It was just the thought of like the way that he had passed away. And it was really, I don't want to go, I don't want to sensationalize it or anything, but like that, that's how it hit me. It was just like, oh my God, like it made me feel like really bad, obviously, for him and for his family and his friends. And he had lots of friends in Hollywood. And I haven't watched it yet, but there is a documentary that they put together about him,
yep,
using a lot of his own footage because he was big. He was headed towards being a director. That was his
yep,
next step because he was already kind of working on getting a film together for him to direct. But he had his own video camera, so he'd go around filming people and filming his friends and stuff like that. So it was interesting to kind of dive into I haven't, like I said, I haven't watched it yet, but just dive into how the documentary came about. And his parents really just wanted his message, his life to be out there, to be out in the ethos, to be open. and to people to celebrate his life, because it was a tragedy when that happened, and it was a very tragic event. And thinking about it now, I'm kind of just getting like goosebumps again. Like it was just, that was one of those moments where I was like, fuck, like that sucks. Like this is terrible.
Mm-hmm. As somebody that's got claustrophobia myself, like just thinking not being able to move and not get away, just triggering. So
yeah, it's one of the, again, like, and it's something again that didn't need to happen. You know, if those cars were made correctly, or if the recalls were done on all those cars, like it didn't need to happen. And that was just always kind of what sat with me. And then just the torture that he must have had to go through to still, like you said, still be alive in that time, for however long it took for him to pass on. But it was just, that was just a messed up situation hearing about that. That one hit hard. Philip Seymour Hoffman, his hit really hard. Yes. Now, his wasn't as, like, I don't want to like belittle it because he was older, but he was in his mid 40s, and we had gotten a lot of work out of him. So there's still a lot of movies to go back and watch and experience his gift. But it's still, it was still shocking. I actually remember where I was. I was on my way to my parents' house for Sunday dinner that we do. Or maybe I think we're on our way to a movie actually. And
wasn't it Super Bowl Sunday?
I think so, yeah. But I think we were going to a movie. We weren't going to watch the game. And my sister called me. She said, "Did you hear about Philip Seymour Hoffman?" I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Oh, he passed away." And I was like, "What?" And then you find out that he had this like drug addiction that was hidden from the public, but it seemed like a lot of people actually in Hollywood knew about it, but that he was keeping it under control. And, I think a lot of people take the I'm not going to tell someone how to live their life method with people. And unfortunately, sometimes when people are doing drugs or talking about ending their life, they're really considering it. Or if he's doing drugs, he was obviously probably really having problems, especially as much heroin as they found in his house.
Right.
So it's just kind of sad to hear that, like, he didn't really seem to, like, he had a lot of things. He had money, he had a family, but he didn't really seem to have anything, really, when you think about it, that no one was there for him. And maybe it's to his own fault. I don't know if he pushed people away. We don't know this kind of information. But it was just sad, really, when you heard about it.
Well, that's the thing. Just because, like, it's like, well, he had all that money. What did he have to be sad about? Those kind of people. It's like, or, well, he shouldn't have been doing drugs, and that's what happened. It's like, shut the hell up, man. You don't know people's journey. Huh? Like, yeah, it's like, oh, well, thanks, thanks, Karen, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
well, that's just like when
how can you be so uncompassionate? Like, yes, he shouldn't have been doing drugs. Theoretically, he should have been happy because he has money. But guess what? Money doesn't buy happiness. It's like,
yes,
exactly. Like, try just a tiny little bit of compassion here, folks.
It seems to be difficult for people to have that for people that they don't know. So,
or even when they do know them, when they're still just, oh, well.
That does happen too. You're right. All right. Well, is there anyone else you wanted to touch on, Wayne?
Gosh.
We talked John Candy before. We did a whole segment on him. Obviously, that one sucked.
Bringing up Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, while they were older, and their deaths were shocking. It's just kind of surrounded by other stuff made it less impactful for me, I guess. Yeah. But still,
Aaliyah. Yeah, Aaliyah was young one because she was very young.
Britney Murphy, that was a shocker.
That's she just yeah. There's a documentary on her too now, I believe, where I think they kind of try to dive in, because there was some questionable stuff about that too, because her, like a month later, like her husband died of the exact same thing. So
right.
I know there were people that were
toxic mold or something, I believe.
Something like that, yeah.
What about Anna Nicole Smith? Now, while not a star like for film or anything, she's kind of just, I don't know. I don't want to be disrespectful, but of why she's famous, but
well,
or infamous, if you will.
Yeah, I mean that one was a little shocking because she was still pretty young.
Yeah, 39.
Yeah, but it really she was only 39. I thought she was
Yep.
older than that.
Nope.
Jeez. Yeah, it's been a while too. How long has that one been?
At least 10 years now, right?
Yeah.
Because her son died a year or so beforehand, and she had that issue with who her daughter's father was, and
Yeah,
obviously
for the
she was
baby. Yeah,
dragged for marrying J. Howard Marshall for,
the old
you
guy who
know,
was dying. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
That was a whole pretty crazy situation. That
when
whole
you
thing.
think back on just the tragedy of it all, it's just like, and just how she got to where she was and the things she had to go through and put herself through, and then
Yeah.
just to be constantly hounded, and
Well,
she was they made fun of her because she got fat, and then she was on trim
yeah,
spot and got thin, and that wasn't good enough for people. So
yeah. That was one of those shocking ones that you're just kind of like, and it's hard to talk because I wasn't really invested in her. She's like you said, she wasn't an actress. She was in Naked Gun 33 and a third. I watched that movie a bunch, but it wasn't like Anna Nicole Smith was like well respected or anything. But it was still a shot the way that she died and stuff. It was very shocking and definitely sad because she had just had the girl, the baby, the daughter was still a baby, I think, right? So that was pretty
yes,
sad in itself. And you
I
wonder
wish
too if the death of her son led her, because I think it was drug related, I believe, like prescription pills or something along those lines.
yes
If
for
that
her
just
and
led
her son,
her,
I believe.
yeah, if that led her down that path. So yeah, I don't, that one was a bit rough. Trying to think, is there any other ones that were like, well, Stan Lee, obviously.
Yep.
But that was another one like similar to Betty White, at least for me. It was like, oh, like he was like 97 years old. Like,
Right.
I get it. Like, I understand.
Freddie Mercury, lead singer of Queen, was obviously, it was really before our time with when he
Yeah.
got his
Oh,
fame and
you're
whatnot.
right. Yeah, I didn't get into him till after he died.
Yeah,
So like that one, but
but just
reading about
with the the AIDS epidemic, if you will, or epidemic. I don't know if that's the correct word, but just the
it,
huge issue
epidemic,
that
pandemic, it was,
AIDS
yeah.
was and continues to be in the 80s and 90s. To hear that somebody is famous and is Freddie Mercury is died from this, it's just make you stop back and go, And
Yeah,
obviously didn't really ingest and really understand all of this till much, much later after he passed away.
yes,
But
of course, yeah. Well, and it
it
was,
rocked the
yeah.
world.
When you go back and you kind of look at the history of the AIDS virus and how many people died at the time, he was one of the more famous people to succumb to AIDS. So they definitely uh, kind of more sentimental look back at it, learning about it than anything. Because, like you said, like while we were alive when that happened, I didn't know Queen until I got older, really. So it was like I didn't really have the respect for him until I was much older. But yeah, I mean, Phil Hartman was another one that kind of messed me up because that was when I was, he was famous when I was younger, so he was
Mm-hmm.
definitely miss him. Always wonder what these guys, Chris Farley, John Candy, Phil Hartman, would be doing today if they were still alive. It's just always interesting, I think, to think about. Um, yeah, so I mean, that's really it. We sorry if we were a downer today. Hopefully, we gave you guys some ideas of some movies to go. We'll go watch some River Phoenix movies for sure. Check out some of the stuff that Bob Saget has directed and written. If you haven't seen Dirty Work, where have you been? It's hilarious. And watch his comedy specials and stuff like that. And any of the people, listen to some Nirvana, watch some other Anton Yelchin films. I think he's got a lot more movies out there than people realize because he did a lot of like B horror movies and stuff that I really like.
Mm-hmm.
And so check him out.
Terminator Salvation is not as bad as everybody says it is.
It is not. People hate on that movie so much. It's not terrible. It was. I thought it was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it. Like, I don't
Yes.
understand the hate. I
Yeah.
understand, the Christian Bale outburst happened during the filming of that movie, which may have
Sure.
dissuaded some folks, but
For sure. All right. So let's get into our two movies this week. So we're
it
gonna
is our
start.
reviews of the week.
Sorry, I meant to have Wayne do that. That's my bad. Sorry. Let's go to our next segment, which is our reviews
Of the week.
There we go. All right. So we're gonna start with the first one, which is the Netflix original. So just so people know, January is kind of a rough month for original content to review. February may not be much better.
January is a rough month in general, man. You're getting out of the holidays, and
Yeah,
I thank goodness that my son is born in January, because it gives me something to look forward to at the end of the month. Because
right, exactly.
I always
So
experience a little bit of the blues feelings, the downers, if you will, after
yes,
Christmas passes.
I think most of us do. The first movie is called Brazen, and it stars Alyssa Milano, directed
It
by Monica
sure
Mitchell.
does.
Yes.
Alyssa Milano was one of my first crushes, if you will, from her time
Okay.
on
All
Who's the
right. So I
Boss.
know what scenes that you were excited about. Um, so this is a movie that it's basically a TV movie. It's basically like a Lifetime movie, and it's
Mhm.
based on a Nora Roberts book, who is like that type of author. So there's a certain audience.
Smut.
Yes, there's a certain audience for this type of movie. Um, we'll go through the plot here. She is an author. She's a famous author who writes kind of the similar type of books as like Nora Roberts, like crime thrillers, whodunits. And she goes to stay with her sister, who went through a divorce and is now fighting for custody after fighting a drug habit. She's clean and sober. She's fighting for custody for her son, but she's a teacher, but she is also at night online dominatrix, and that's the sex work basically. Um, so the sister is on a date with the neighbor, who is a detective who's on break because he just solved a big case, and who's on vacation. And she and him kind of hit it off. They go on a date, and then she goes home and she finds her sister strangled to death on her bedroom floor. And she runs and gets the detective. She's all distraught. And he ends up taking the case because he got close with her just in that one night, essentially, and really likes her and wants to help her out, essentially, and feels like it's in good hands, in his hands. Him and his crazy hair partner, who 10 years ago, 15 years ago, would have been Mark Boone Jr., but they cast a different guy who also has
Malachi
crazy
Weir. I give extra points just for the hairstyle.
Yes, exactly. And so then they kind of reluctantly, the captain, the female captain, ends up letting her work on the investigation because another murder happened. So she gives the captain some nice insight, and the captain is convinced to then let her help on the investigation and be able to kind of help solve her sister's murder. It's really cheesy. The dialogue is really cheesy. It plays out like an extended pilot episode of a new TV show, almost, is how I felt.
If you pay any attention at all, you kind of figure it out within
Yeah,
like the first
it's
20
pretty.
minutes.
It's honestly, dude. Like, I think when we meet the character that is the killer for the first time, I was like, oh, it's probably that guy.
Yep.
And it was like, and I was right. I don't want to like trash this movie. It's a trashy movie though, because there is an audience for this type of movie for sure. It's definitely that pulpy type of. Again, you would pick up the Nora Roberts novel and you would read it in like 2 days because that's how exciting it is to get through one of these books. But unfortunately, really, when you extend that out into movie form, there is you realize that there really isn't a whole lot there, and that's what this movie succumbs to. There isn't a whole lot going on. It's your paint by numbers, who's the killer movie. Alyssa Milano's good in it. I'll say that, and not just because she does dress up as a dominatrix at some point in the movie, but
She did? I missed that part. I have to go back and check.
Deserves a rewatch, sir.
Yeah, on mute and fast forward.
Like I said, I chose this one because there were 2 movies coming out this week streaming wise, and this was one of them, and the other one we're going to talk about was the other one. So this yeah, I don't know. I recommend it for people that like Lifetime movies, like Lifetime thrillers, not the holiday movies. If you like a good Lifetime thriller, then I think you'll like this movie. It kind of ends a bit too like happy at the end for a woman who just lost her sister. Like you get the idea. It's only been like a week.
Yeah, it's yeah, and then a lot of gratuitous, not gratuitous, but a lot of sexy time when something tragic has just happened. It's like, well,
I
I
think
don't know if
it's
I'd
one
be
of
in the
those.
mood for that.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that. So yeah, it should come with a warning. It's a Lifetime movie, but made by Netflix. So while there isn't really a lot of nudity or sex in it, there's a lot of that type of talk. There is the dominatrix outfits and the sexiness and all that kind of stuff. So if that stuff bothers you, probably don't watch it. But if you kind of like a 50 Shades of Grey style book, but this is a thriller, then maybe you'd be interested in it.
Mm,
I did like some of the themes where women should be able to do whatever they want without being judged. Like that was a huge theme in this movie, so I did appreciate that kind of stuff.
absolutely.
It's just not a very good movie, to be honest. So I don't know. I would say not being a fan of this genre, a 3 out of 10. But if you're a fan of this genre, probably like a 5 or 6 out of 10, maybe.
I gave it a 3, 2 for Alyssa Milano, and then 1 for Malachi Weir's hair. So
His hair was amazing. I
yep.
will give him that. He did not seem like a detective, though, at all.
No.
But his hair was incredible. All right, so we're going to move on to the next movie, which, Wayne, so I know you watched it. I'm going to let you know how I watched this movie. I put it on last night. My parents are in town. So we watched this movie, me and my wife, in front of my parents, which we're all adults. So it's not, looking at Wade, I could tell. Yeah, you can
Miranda
imagine.
had to come over and check what I was watching. So
yes. At one point, my wife was like, if you wanted to watch porn, we could have just gone into the other room. And I was like, it's not porn. It's way different.
I will say the symbolism that they used was fantastic.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Sex Appeal.
The movie is called Sex Appeal.
Yes.
It is, what was it, Hulu, I believe?
Yes, it's a Hulu original. It just came out Friday. It stars Mika Abdallah, Jake Short, Rebecca Henderson, Mason Versa. The people that you would probably know are what's her name?
Fortune, Feimster, and Margaret Cho.
Yes, Margaret Cho. Yes, and Fortune. It's Fortune, right?
Yes, Fortune Feimster, I believe is how you pronounce it.
They are really Fortune Feimster and Margaret Cho, and then let me get the other woman.
Rebecca Henderson.
Rebecca Henderson are her 3 moms. She basically Cho and Feimster are her 2 moms, and then they break up, and then Margaret Cho's with another woman who is played by Henderson. So it's like she has 3 moms. So Mika plays Avery, and Avery is the superstar student, very smart, high grades, going to go to MIT. She's very science oriented. She's getting ready for STEMCom, which is a big science festival, but she has a boyfriend from a year ago when the last STEMCom was, and he messages her on like FaceTime and basically says that he's ready to have sex. And this throws her for a loop because she wasn't ready to hear that. She's very goal oriented, very grade oriented. So she starts to freak out. She knew that this was a thing that was probably going to have to happen at some point, but she was kind of putting it off. So the STEMCom project has to be an app that you create that helps you improve something in your personal life. So she has nothing to improve, according to her, until the whole sex thing gets brought up. So then she realizes that she needs to make the app about her losing her virginity, essentially. And that just opens up the door for lots of hilarity to ensue, if you will. She ends up, her mother, Margaret Cho, is a painter who draws vulvas, lots of vaginas hanging around their house. So they make the joke that she's been comparing herself to that ever since she was a child. It's one of those coming of age stories. that I like per se. Like I like these style of movies. It does deal with a lot of sexual things, which made it a little uncomfortable sitting watching it with my parents. But luckily, like Wayne said, a lot of the metaphors that they use for sex are actually quite hilarious and work really well. I think within the concept of the movie, I think it's a pretty smart film about sexual education and knowing your own body and coming of age and just becoming your own person. It's not a rom com, as it kind of maybe the poster would make that seem like it's a rom com. It's really not. There isn't a happy-go-lucky ending here. I mean, there's a happy ending, but not a.
That's why it's the ending, which, we're not spoiling anything. I give extra points to because they didn't end it the way every other freaking happy-go-lucky high school teen movie ends.
Exactly, so. And I really like that aspect of it too. I like the more, we'll call it a growth ending. She has a real growth at the end of this film.
Oh, it was growth, all right.
But I mean, and if you're a person that shudders at the idea of watching a movie about teenagers discovering sex, then don't watch this movie because that's what it's about. But I remember, and I've mentioned it on this podcast before. We like coming of age movies throughout our life because we're always coming of age. We're always growing. We're always becoming not different people per se, but a better version of ourselves, sometimes a worse version of ourselves, then to become a better version of ourselves later. It just depends on that's how life is. That's why I like these movies, because it really truly shows, how we grow and how we learn. And it's, one of those things like Rebecca talked about watching, maybe you should have Donovan watch it, because I told her, because of what it's about. And I'm like, she was obviously joking, but I'm like, well, at some point, when he gets a little older, I'd like him to watch stuff like this. So if he has any questions and
it's not bad. There's no gratuitous anything.
No, there really isn't. It's just
when you talk about stuff.
It's the language, which I can tell you right now, by the time they get in the high school, they're going to be hearing a lot worse probably. So if you're...
I'm sure they hear worse right now. I mean, I've heard right, exactly. Dawson playing Fortnite, and I'm like, oh my God, is that my kid?
That's true.
That was an impressive string of derivatives. Wow.
Yeah, wow. I'm not even mad. I'm impressed. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a perfect movie. Maybe there's some pacing issues, I would say. But I did enjoy it. Go ahead.
I took issue with the cheating aspect. I mean, whether you agree or not with it, I had a little bit of it. I was like, what do you mean that's not cheating? Get out of here. I'm being vague, but
I think, you know what, Wayne, and maybe it's just we're different. And like, to me, what it was trying to show was that, because back, when we grew up, like, it was like you have the one partner and that's it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what she's more inferring to is like they weren't really in like a relationship necessarily. So it's different, and I think now too everything flows a little bit more. So everything's a little more loose, if you will.
I guess if it's like there's an understanding in the relationship that is more of an open thing, cool. But it seems like one side was more, hey, and
I get you.
And hey, to each their own. I am not here to judge. Just for me, it's kind of like
you would have been upset, yes. Well, and I think not going with that, I think one of the characters in the film does not appreciate what has happened and how it has happened. But it's more about love and respect, I think, in that regard. But yeah, the movie overall, I think, is enjoyable. I think it's a fun watch. It's a short watch. It's only an hour and a half. It is similar. One of the reviews there was like, well, it's no sex education. I was like, no, it's not. Sex education has had 30 episodes to kind of grow their story and be very like sex education is something I would definitely recommend everybody watching on Netflix. It's 3 seasons right now. They're doing a 4th, and it's a great show. I love it. It's one of my favorite shows on TV. Mm-hmm. This does relate because it is about high school kids and sex. I would recommend watching this and then going and watching Sex Education, because Sex Education is better, but this is a nice kind of precursor to that, I think. And you'll maybe see where this movie kind of got some of its ideas, because that Sex Education's been on for a couple years now.
Yep.
But I did like it. I enjoyed my time watching it.
I found it very funny, the correct spots, and very touching and sentimental in the other spots. So,
yeah. And I think it's important to note too that with your kids, when you're raising your kids, you have to remind them that you're always learning. We're always learning as adults. You're constantly learning as kids. You're going to keep learning. How you are at 20 isn't going to be how you are at 30. There are so many things that are going to happen in your life that are going to make you change in a different direction, change your feelings and that kind of stuff. So these movies, I think, are important for kids to watch because they're made for them. They're made for kids to kind of experience this stuff and be like, oh, okay, so this is normal. I shouldn't feel weird about this.
Right, and being open and being able to have conversations with your parents or other people, not feel like you're a freak or should be ashamed of yourself. It's like, no. This is okay to talk about. It's something that, it's a safe space. And
yes, exactly.
I don't know how it was with you growing up, but a lot of times stuff was a lot more shunned. And no, we don't do that. We don't talk about this. And
yeah, I don't remember having
the only way. Abstinence.
Yeah. Like, my parents were never like shunning any of it, but I don't remember having a lot of like open conversations. We just didn't talk about it as much, right. As I think it is like a conversation today, where a healthy sexual relationship is important for, I think, most relationships, and that's something that I think a lot of these type of movies today, they're made for kids today, focus on, and that it's okay to be different. It's okay to be a little weird. It's they talk in the movie. They talk about some of the kinks. I love the little kid who had all the like sex things down. He kept spouting them off like he was an expert. Everyone just kind of kept staring at him. Like, wait, what? And then the one girl,
young Avery, borrowing the batteries out of certain devices.
Oh yes. I thought that was great. No, me and vibrators have a weird relationship. Okay, well. I forgot that Paris Jackson was in this movie. Paris Jackson, Michael Jackson's daughter. She plays the experienced high school student, we'll say. The one that they send her to go talk to. So I thought that was interesting. Those conversations were fun. But yeah, overall, I would say, I don't know, 6.5, Wayne, out of 10. Like, it's an enjoyable movie. Maybe a 7 at the highest.
I'll go 7. Yeah.
Let's say 7. Let's say 7 out of 10. It's a fun movie. It's something I think you could watch with your older kids. Maybe you won't want to because you'll feel uncomfortable. But it is definitely, I think, worth watching. It's a lot of fun. Definitely recommend checking it out. Interested to see what some of the young cast, like Mika Abdallah, what she does. Jake Short was really funny in it. Some of the other kids who became like her court, who she would go talk to and ask the questions to, they were pretty funny too. So I'd like to see them in some more things. But yeah, overall, I think a solid flick. Kind of not really expecting much because, again, like I said, there wasn't really much coming out this week. So I do have one more movie that I want to kind of review in that I saw myself that you did not watch. So I'll just talk about it real quick. Yesterday, I got a chance to go see the new Scream movie. And
yes.
I loved it.
Nice.
I'm a huge fan of this franchise. Everyone knows that Scream is in my top 5 movies of all time. I even love the sequels, which a lot of people do not. I'm a fan of this franchise. It's probably I would say it's my second favorite horror franchise next to Halloween, but I would actually argue that I like all of the sequels more in Scream than I do in the Halloween sequels, if that makes sense. But that's because there's so many Halloween sequels, and there are some bad ones.
Yeah, there are a couple ones that are cringe. Like, what?
Yes. Yeah, there's Halloween Resurrection and Halloween 6. Those are the only 2 I really need to mention. People go, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't think Scream has the movies that are that bad. You can argue that
Nev Campbell did it.
Yes.
No? Okay. Dewey did it. No? All right. Courtney Cox? Damn it.
So this new one, I did what I like about the way I viewed this. I saw the teaser trailer, and then I didn't watch another trailer. I didn't want to know anything. I knew they were going to be, pulling the wool over our eyes with just the trailer, so I wanted to go in kind of fresh. You get a great young cast, new cast, and then you get, obviously, Wayne already mentioned some of the returning cast in Courtney Cox, Nev Campbell, and David Arquette, but also Marley Shelton, who was in the 4th movie as one of Dewey's deputies. Let me go. I just want to go over this new cast here. So Melissa Barrera, she's the main star. She plays Sam. Jenna Ortega plays her sister Tara. Dylan Minnette from 13 Reasons Why plays Wes Hicks. Wes in honor of Wes Craven, because obviously he passed away before they could make this movie. Jack Quaid, son of Randy, Dennis. Son of Dennis and Meg Ryan, plays Richie. Jasmine Savoy Brown and Mason Gooding play the twins. See, there's so much in this movie, Wayne, that I can't talk about. So I'm not going to, that's why I didn't want to do like a full review. It's not going to be a full-on review of everything because there's a lot of this movie that was hidden from the trailers, and I don't want to give anything away.
Do I need to revisit the sequels before I see this movie?
Honestly, I think you really just need to watch the first one. Okay. And then if you don't remember Marley Shelton's character from 4, watch 4 again. But you don't need to really watch 2 or 3, I think, to understand where they go. A lot of it, so what's good about the Scream movies is it's always been very meta, very much you're watching a horror movie within a horror movie type of feeling. And they treat this one like they treat they call it requels, which are the remake sequels that like Halloween, where it's like a sequel 30 years later. So they make fun of that in this movie where, basically calling Scream 5 the movie, it's called Scream, but what you're watching, like the next one in the series. So they do a lot of smart stuff like that. There's obviously plenty of funny jokes, great one-liners. There's a lot of connections back to the first Scream. I'm going to let everyone kind of figure that out for themselves. It really is a solid flick. I like this movie a lot. I don't know where it ranks. It's probably right next to Scream 2, which is my second favorite, or was until this. So they're probably about the same, I would say.
Are my mom and dad going to be so mad?
I don't know. As long as you liver them alone, man. Get it? Because they found her liver in the mailbox. Matthew Lillard is missed for sure. It's just really, if you're a Scream fan, you'll enjoy it. So if you feel safe enough going to the theaters, I do recommend going out and checking it out. It's really, really good. You will not be disappointed. And that's all I'm going to say about that because I don't want to spoil anything. But everybody, it's great to have the original 3, the Trinity back in form. And yeah, it's very bloody. It's a bloody, bloody mess, and that's how I love my horror films. So it's definitely really something you guys should go check out. All right. So is there anything you watched this week, Wayne, that you want to talk about real quick?
No, not really.
No? Okay.
Trying to think off the top of my head if there's anything or what I even watched, really. I finished Dexter, New Blood. It's controversial. I'll say that. It ended better than the original series, but there's still some things. What started out with a lot of momentum and was really great, just kind of, it's controversial. Is where I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So, yep, interesting there where that's going to go. Yep, that's the only thing that really I can think of that I really need to take the time to talk about.
Okay. So I started watching some like folk horror this last week. So I watched Witchfinder General. I've got some other ones on the docket I'm going to watch. That one's with Vincent Price. It's really interesting film about a bunch of, but not a bunch, but 2 guys who go from town to town saying people are witches and then hanging them. And obviously, as we know, they're witches for the most part probably never actually existed. So they just murdered a bunch of innocent people. So knowing that when you kind of watch it with today's mentality, it becomes a very interesting film. And Vincent Price plays one of those villainous people. Usually he played, kind of a goofy character, but this one's pretty serious. It's really good. I actually liked it a lot. So I do recommend it. It's on Shudder. Long story short, on Netflix, Wayne, I think that one's right up your alley. It's a time travel love story. So
sign me up. I'm looking it up now.
It's on Netflix. It's not a Netflix original, but it's up there now. It's with Rafe Spall. I thought it was pretty good. I give that one a 6 out of 10. Knife of Ice, which is a Italian giallo film, or giallo, or however you say that. I try to watch, one of those every once in a while. It's not my favorite genre of horror films, but I do like the very watery blood that comes down. I shouldn't say it's not my favorite, because slasher films are my favorite, and giallo is basically Italian slashers, but they don't make them like that anymore, so it's a little different. You kind of have to get into the right one. This one was good. It just didn't have a lot of blood in it, which was disappointing.
So as I'm going through, not to interrupt, I'm going through Netflix right now just to, add to my watch list, and something popped up from Australia called Outback Truckers. It's a TV series. It was on from 15 through 2018. And if it looks half as good as the display picture, I am going to love this. I will report back next week.
Okay.
Crikey. I think my 18-wheeler's going to make it.
All right, so on to the news and notes then for the week. All right, so news this week. Bill Murray confirms Ant-Man role, says he's playing a bad guy. So not sure if that's like a super villain or if he's just going to be like a bad person.
Or he's just going to be Bill Murray.
Or he's just going to be Bill Murray. Tarantino and Roger Avery, co-writer of Pulp Fiction, have mended fences and are reteaming for a podcast called Video Archives. So Quentin Tarantino bought the Video Archives video store and all their catalog of films, which is a bunch of VHS films. So Roger Avery and him, like once a month, they're going to get together and watch a bunch of those VHS films that they haven't seen and talk about them. So that's a pretty interesting idea for a podcast. It's cool that they're friends again because they worked on Pulp Fiction together. So
maybe we should have them on.
Yeah, I'll reach out to them.
We could throw them a bone, see if we can get their numbers up.
We've been doing this a lot longer than they have, so.
Yep.
Talk to us when you got 80 episodes, you chumps. All right. No, anyway, just kidding, Tarantino, if you're listening. Emily in Paris has been renewed for seasons 3 and 4 at Netflix. I Know What You Did Last Summer has been canceled after one season at Amazon Prime Video. The Raid remake is being directed by Patrick Hughes for Netflix, Michael Bay to produce. Hell or High Water TV series in development at Fox. Aubrey Plaza joins Michael Imperioli in White Lotus Season 2. Pig director Michael Sarnowski to direct a Quiet Place spinoff. The Oscars will see the return of a host this year. They have gone 3 years without one. John Watts, director of Spider-Man, the newest Spider-Man trilogy, is producing Final Destination 6 over at HBO Max. Sharon Stone joins Flight Attendant Season 2. Mahershala Ali to star in a miniseries called The Plot over at Hulu. Gal Gadot to star in To Catch a Thief for Paramount Pictures. It's a remake. The Great renewed for Season 3 at Hulu. Grey's Anatomy renewed for a 19th season. The Morning Show renewed for Season 3. Jessica Roth of the Happy Death Day films replaces Samara Weaving in Sam Raimi-produced Boy Kills World. Red Notice sequels to film back-to-back with original cast and director. Denzel reuniting with Antoine Fuqua for third Equalizer film. Pete Davidson to star in The Home from The Purge director. Asa Butterfield and Natalia Dyer will star in All Fun and Games horror thriller being produced by the Russo brothers. Quantum Leap sequel/reboot ordered at NBC. Jake Gyllenhaal and Guy Ritchie film acquired by Amazon and MGM. David Ramsey returning as Diggle in possible Arrowverse spinoff about training young heroes. Raylan Givens is back in Justified City Primeval. Timothy Olyphant will reprise his role in sequel limited series at FX. I'm really excited about this show because I love Justified. Santa Claus TV series starring Tim Allen and from the director of Last Man Standing heading to Disney+. Real Steel series in development at Disney+, with the original director involved in that one. Jeremy Slater will write and direct film being described as Back to the Future meets Aliens. James Wan will produce Degrassi Revival headed to HBO Max. A lot of news this week, obviously, so you guys can tell. Releases. Bel Air hits Peacock February 13th. Kimmy from Steven Soderbergh and starring Zoe Kravitz hits HBO Max February 10th. The Offer, a limited series about the making of The Godfather, hits Paramount Plus April 28th. That's we already talked about Bob Saget. Rest in peace to him. Dwayne Hickman, who my dad had to explain to me who he was, and I told him we'd mention him on the podcast because I don't know who Dwayne Hickman is. He passed away. He was known as the star of the Dobie Gillis show or whatever the hell that thing was called with Bob Denver. I know. That's the same look I gave him. And he showed me and Rebecca the opening to it. And we're like, wow, this is very misogynistic and very sexist. He talks about the type of girls he likes. And that he sounds like an incel, Wayne, is what he sounds like. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is an interesting show. But I told my dad we'd mention it. So Dwayne Hickman passed away. Rest in peace, Dwayne Hickman. That's our show for the week, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. We know it was kind of a downer to start, but hopefully we give you some good ideas of what to watch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as always, thanks for listening to Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. We appreciate it. And, you know, we're almost at 80 episodes. We'll be getting 100 pretty soon, so that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, we got to start planning. We got to think about something special to do.
We do. We have to think. We got about 20 episodes before we get there, so we got to figure it out. But as always, thank you for listening to Now Showing with Mike and Wayne.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
Hasta la vista, baby.
Hey, everybody, we're all gonna get laid.